This is World of Info. We're coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr MABROuk. Dua Muhammad is at the control, and we are here with you for 1 hour. And today in the World of Info, we are in the world of books. And yes, today we are going to dedicate the whole program to a very interesting book, because this book has been changed lately into a movie that is having 2 mega stars. And definitely, this book also deserves to be read. The book name is The Nazi and the Psychiatrist, Hermann Göring and Dr. Douglas Kelly, and the Fatal Meetings of Minds at the End of World War II by Jack LaHaye. And yes, this is a very interesting book that has been changed lately in 2025 into a very interesting movie called Nuremberg, and it's been the 2 famous actors, Rami Malek, the famous actor, Oscar-winning actor who is from an Egyptian origin, and Russell Crowe in the role of Göring, the famous Nazi leader. Well, very interesting book. Stay tuned with us, and after the break, we'll tell you all that is. So, what is the story? Well, yes, you're still listening to the World of Info, the world of books, and today the book is The Nazi and the Psychiatrist. Jack LaHaye, the author, and the 2 characters are Hermann Göring, the famous Reich Marshal, the war criminal, the man who has inflicted trauma not only on the whole world but also on his country people, and a psychiatrist who happened to be the psychiatrist of the jail where Hermann Göring stayed his final days in. So it's a very interesting book by Jack LaHaye. And when we talk about that, we have to go first how all things started. How a psychiatrist, an American psychiatrist, became the one responsible for the mental and the health well-being and the analysis of Hermann Göring. And who is really Hermann Göring? So let's go first to take the psychiatrist, because he's the one who told the story in a book published in the 1947 or 48, and it was called The 22 Cells, and meaning the number of cells that the war criminals who belonged to the top-ranking Nazi leaders who have fallen in the custody of the Allies, and it was decided that they should be governed by an international judiciary court that is formed of 4 judges that belong to the Allies, and these were the Americans, the British, the French, and the Soviet judges. And it was the job of this court to judge them and to see who committed crimes. And actually, it was proved that it was a very long procedure. So let's talk first about the psychiatrist. Well, the psychiatrist is Dr. Douglas Kelly. He was born in 1912 to a very eminent and a very highly cultured mother. And she was a lawyer. Her father was a very eminent gentleman who was also a lawyer and who was a great collector of butterflies, of nature, and he had a house that was designed by him and overlooking a beautiful area, and he was so much interested in history and history of the region surrounding, and even about cannibalism that happened in the nearby when a group of people lost their way in the desert and had to survive on eating the carcasses of some of them. And actually this is a very wretched story, but it gives you an idea of this family that kept the myth and the story and to discuss it. So his father was a dentist, and he was a really good dentist, but he was only involved in his work in dentistry. The mother, being such a cultured lady and having a lot of hobbies, was interested to make her son very broad-minded. And it was, she discovered by time that her son was very intelligent. And so she decided to measure this intelligence. And at that time, there was a famous gentleman, a physician and a psychologist by the name of Termer, who has started or innovated a new method of IQ testing. And this gentleman has decided that whenever he gets a child who has his IQ more than 140, he will put it in his special group that he intended that he's going to watch these children, how are they going to fare in the society. And it was in this special group, 1660 children, boys and girls. He kept a track of them, and he said, and he admitted, that Douglas Kelly was one of the brightest and the most difficult to understand and interpret. So let's take the story. So she found out that this guy was really a very interesting person, and definitely she thought that he could really get the fact. The mother thought that this intelligent boy should receive the best of education, and she decided to educate him and sharpen his skills. And even he really admired that, and he really liked always to be the center of attention. That's why he learned some magic tricks with the cards and things like that, and this you can see also in the movie. So Douglas Kelly, being that sharp, could rise in the school very rapidly with the help of his mother, and therefore he graduated as the youngest of his class, joined the medical school, the pre-med and the medical school, and graduated from a very great university, Princeton, and he enrolled in to get a PhD. He decided to become a psychiatrist, and so he went into psychiatry field and had his PhD from University of Columbia, a very prestigious university. He joined the army once the war started, and he became a psychiatrist in the army. During his service in the army, he was very sharp in treating a syndrome that has been established to be one of the earliest psychiatrists who could diagnose this syndrome. And this syndrome was the post-traumatic distress disorder, or symptoms, or the nervous breakdowns that usually affect the young soldiers who face a lot of tragedies in the war when they see their friends being killed or maimed, and they survive. So they survive with no apparent scars, but their psychology the psyche is definitely affected. He was very clever in treatment a lot of these patients and youngsters, and even bring them back to the service in the army. So he was considered to be one of the eminent psychiatrists, that he even received in such a short period promotion from a captain to a major. And when the war finished in the European theater, they decided that they are going to send him to the jail of Nuremberg, where the Allies decided to put all the famous leaders, or the leaders of the Nazi party and the Nazi Germany, that they decided that they're not going to shoot them, they're going to try them in a very eminent way to make sure that if any one of them is really innocent, should be acquitted. And this was really a great decision to be made. So they were all put in the jail in 22 cells, and we can find the most famous of them, including, of course, number 2 of the Nazi regime, because number 1, Hitler died, killed himself. It was Hermann Göring, and we'll talk about Hermann Göring after we finish this part. So Douglas Kelly found himself responsible for the well-being of these incarcerated prisoners, the diagnosis and the analysis of their psyche, and the decision, should they be, are they fit mentally and health-wise to be judged in the courts, or they are certified as to be insane. And so this was the job of Douglas Kelly in the jail of Nuremberg. So after the break, we'll talk about Hermann Göring. So you're still listening to the World of Info, and today is the World of Books, and today is a very interesting book, The Nazi and the Psychiatrist by Jack L. Hay, and definitely that's interesting because we are now talking about Hermann Göring. Who is Hermann Göring? Hermann Göring is a pilot, a German pilot, who was a very distinguished ace fighter pilot during First World War, and he received a lot of decorations. First class Knight, Black Cross, Iron Cross, and he was a very distinguished fighter in World War I. During the war, he has suffered from injuries and ditched from his plane without the parachute, and of course he had an injury in his back that received for it a lot of medications, including, of course, morphine, which he became sometimes addicted to it. So this is him as in 1919, after World War I, facing the problem and the tragedy that he is no longer an officer because the army has been put aback after the war, and that Germany has surrendered, a very humiliating surrender, and that's facing a lot of fines, and his country is not great anymore. So he decided, for his own ego, as he's a very narcissist person, he always liked to be the center of attraction, to join a rising party, that is the Nazi Party or the National Socialist Party of Hitler. He decided to join him because he thought that since this is a small party and Hitler is a demagogue and he can attract the listeners and attract more participants, if he helps Hitler, will become or will start to have a great position in this party, and that's what he thought. And actually, this is what actually happened. He became the right arm of Hitler. He became so much convinced with him. He shared with him in all his trials and failed trials to get to authority, whether this was in 1923. He went to jail as well. He has supported his book Mein Kampf. So he was a real associate of Hitler. Not from love as much as from selfish behavior and wanting to be to admire and to love authority. And it all went right with them, and we know how Hitler has raised to power in 1933 with these elections that brought the Nazi Party in control. And he, over there, he decided to join him more in force, and he became not only the president or the president of the Reichstag, the parliament, but also he worked for some time as the founder and the president of the storm troops, what they're called the SA, which were later being disintegrated with the problem that happened with one of its leaders, that's Ernst Röhm, who was considered to be by Hitler considered him as a traitor, and Göring accepted that he should be killed, and he didn't care that he was a friend of his. So he was the founder of the Gestapo, and Himmler was one of his assistants. Imagine this. This is Hermann Göring. And at the same time, he was one of the masterminds of a lot of things. Perhaps the most important of is the Nuremberg laws of 1935. So stay tuned to us because we have more information about it. So what happened? Actually, in Nuremberg 1935, this was the establishment of the racist rules and the anti-Semitic rules and laws that was masterminded by Hitler and supported by Hermann Göring. At the same time, Hitler had a lot of his ambitions to found a new or the Third Reich or the Empire. And he decided to modernize the army of the German army against the Versailles Treaty of 1919. And therefore, Germany at that time was not supposed to have an air force. But they broke this treaty and they started forming the Luftwaffe, the new air force of Germany, and the founder and the commander-in-chief was Göring. And he was given the rank of a marshal, and later on giving the rank of a Reich Marshal, that is the highest possible rank in the army, and to become the second in command to Hitler. And Hitler said, if I ever pass out or die, I would be replaced by Hermann Göring. And so Hermann Göring was a real ambitious narcissist person and involved in all the gross acts and moves made by Hitler. And he was one of his masterminds and doer of all these bad deeds and the concentration camps and his role in forming the Gestapo, although he left it to Himmler later on, but he's having a lot of dirt on his hands, and therefore he deserves to be definitely going to the court of the criminal crimes of war. But we have to emphasize that he didn't only have all these problems, but he was, because of his narcissism and his belief that he is invincible, was a great admirer of all the luxuries of life, including after the start of the World War II, by confiscating a lot of the treasures from the European museums, getting them to his own private collection, and having a museum for himself of the things that he loved in the Karen Hall, that is the palace that he had, and he named it after his first wife. And he married a new wife after his wife died. Her name was Emmy. She was a famous German actress, and he had from her his only child, Ida. So this is a very interesting point of view, that how this guy, who was full of greed and love to everything, that he confiscated all these treasures. And during the end of the war, when he found out that he has lost the great stature with Hitler, he kept going from one place to another from his different palaces with a train that has all the treasures that he has stolen from these famous museums. And even one of the problems is that when he had his daughter born, we found out that one of the famous paintings was dedicated to his daughter, and his daughter later on in the 60s tried to keep this and saying that this was a gift from the state, but of course this was nullified and it returned to its original owners. So this is Hermann Göring, the man who has fallen from grace with Hitler, but still Hitler decided on his final days and his will that he's going to give the authority to Karl Deutz, that is the Grand Admiral of the German Navy. But Göring he even gave an order to Martin Bormann to shoot Hermann Göring, but Martin Bormann said, I need full signature from Hitler or to fulfill this order, and I cannot take it verbally, and therefore he was saved from being killed. So there he was, surrendering to the Allied forces and giving in with all his trophies and all his jewels and emeralds and all this stuff, and all things were taken from him. His daughter and wife were kept in another safe house, and then later on his wife was partially incarcerated in a prison camp to see if she was involved in any theft or things, and then she was released. So this is Göring in the jail, and Hermann Göring met Douglas Kelly, and at that time Göring was in the top of his addiction of morphia and codeine tablets. Codeine is a very potent synthetic derivative of morphine. So the first thing Douglas Kelly made was to approach this man and to make him get rid of this addiction, and he was able to stop him from the drug and from the medication, and therefore he was preparing him to check him out and to understand the real story of his, and at the same time treat him, and at the same time checking and writing the report should this man be tried or he is insane. And it was proved that he is totally sane, and he is very well oriented to space and time, and he knows quite well what he has done, and he is preparing his defense that is going to be a great theatrical defense in the court of law. So we're still in the Nuremberg jail or prison, headed by a famous American commander who was a colonel, who was responsible for controlling all these egomaniac prisoners and making sure that they will not commit suicide or start a riot or whatever could happen to them. So after the break, we'll talk about Hermann Göring and Douglas Kelly and what they did. So what happened actually is that Kelly really befriended Göring, and Göring had a very charming personality and very charismatic. And he's a great manipulator. He even was able to manipulate the psychiatrist, convince him that he is a very good friend of his, and all this. But of course, a psychiatrist is a really clever man, and of course, we know now that Kelly was really very intelligent. So they had a lot of talks and discussions and talks about Hitler and talks about how he joined the Nazi party. And of course, all this was recorded and reported to the headquarters. It was not just a pure medical thing, but also it was an important role of Kelly to make sure that this man is not going to manipulate his fellow prisoners and at the same time cause any riots. He was a very dangerous psychopath, and even he told Kelly how he was involved in the murder of his friend Ernest Röhm of the SA and the stormtroops and all this stuff. So a man who was merciless like this needed to be taken proper care of by a real professional psychiatrist. The role of Kelly was also to evaluate other characters, and they were quite famous. And of course, the court days are going to be approaching, and we can say that on the court started in 1945, 20th of November. In December 1945. Kelly thought that he has to leave. I mean, he knew that he quite well has done his job. He has prepared all these people for judgment. And at the same time, he was able to try to evaluate Rudolf Hess. The story of Rudolf Hess is a very strange story. He was number 3, and he decided to go on a trip to England and jumped or bailed out from the Messerschmitt plane and wanted to act as a sort of a peace envoy between Hitler and the British government, Churchill. But of course, it turned out that he was just suffering from some psychological disturbance. I read the book of his, the memoirs he did, and he was reporting that he faked the amnesia and that he wanted not to be judged, and so he pretended to have no memory whatsoever. And he was actually able to deceive not only Kelly, but also the psychologist in charge, who was Gilbert as well. So there was Gilbert, the psychologist, who came and joined forces with Kelly to support these prisoners in preparing them for the governorship, and and Kelly left by the end of December. However, the court and the trials went on, started in the 20th of November, and it went on for 212 days. The judgment, in June 21, 1946, the court judge rested for making the decision, and it went after listening to all the witnesses possible and interrogating the whole charged people or the accused people who were involved. And on October 1st, 1946, the court came back again and decided to give the verdicts. And it was on October 16 that the execution was done to all the ones who had to be tried by execution. 3 only have been acquitted, and these 3 who have been acquitted was Papen. The Papen was the very famous associate chancellor. He helped Hitler to rise to power, and he was one of the aristocrats and nobles, and Hitler has put him after that as an ambassador. He stayed as an ambassador in Ankara for a very long period of time, and he was acquitted. And also Fritsch was also acquitted because he was the announcer who was responsible for the broadcasts prepared by Goebbels. So he was also acquitted, but these two people were later on incriminated with minor crimes and stayed in jail for a short period of time, and then they were released. But the most important one who was released was Schacht, who was the Minister of Economics, who helped Germany to survive and to get into become a strong economic power from 1933 till 1939. And then he has fallen in grace from Hitler, that he even was put in a concentration camp. He was acquitted and he was never charged, and even he went in working as an economist, and he took a share in building the IMF and the International Bank. So these are the people who went to this court, and the three who were acquitted. And of course, Göring received to be executed by hanging. And he said that I am a marshal, I should be shot and not to be hanged like normal criminals. And he was denied that. And so he decided to take his life with a cyanide ampoule. Nobody knows how did he get this cyanide ampoule and from where did he get it. And this remains a very strange secret and a very controversial secret up till now in the history books. Rumors have it that one of the guards has given him this ampoule, or that it was passed by one of the guards who was guarding him in the court. And actually he has written a note acquitting all the people involved and said that he has kept this always with him, and he has decided to take it because he was denied the chance to be shot like a military man, and he didn't want to be hanged like common criminals. So this was supposedly the end of this Nuremberg trials. But what happened to Douglas Cayley is part of what we have seen in part of the movie and also in the book that I am just telling you about. So stay tuned to us. We'll talk more about the Nazi and the psychiatrist. Let's talk about the psychiatrist after the break. So still listening to the World of Info, and today is the World of Books. And yes, the book is The Nazi and the Psychiatrist by Jekyll Hay. And we discussed how the court has ended its decisions and how these people met their fate. But we'd like to talk and more emphasis on Douglas Kelly. How did Douglas Kelly fare afterwards? In the movie, we've seen that something which was not true is that Kelly was dishonorably discharged because he has given a talk to one of the journalists that has written the analysis that he has just told her about this, about Göring, and this was against the ethics, and therefore he was told that he will be discharged from the army and sent back home. Actually, this didn't happen. What happened, in the truth, is that he was asked to be relieved from his task because he has been working for consecutive 4 or 5 years. He hasn't seen his wife, and he hasn't been to his home since 4 or 5 years, and he was completely exhausted, and he has finished his job in the Nuremberg. So he was given an order to go back to the United States, and he also, being relieved, before he was relieved, he was given the rank of a lieutenant colonel, so it was a promotion, not a real bad discharge. When he was discharged, he has received all the documents that he has sent back home and all the narration that he has written, and he decided that he's going someday to write a book. Well, actually, he was so much exhausted and he wanted to return to his wife, and he was involved in the first year with living a normal, healthy family life and trying to find himself a post as a professor of psychiatry. And he found actual as a tutor, not a professor. And then later on he was able to find a job as a professor of criminology, and he worked as as a counselor for a lot of some of the police departments for analyzing of criminals and trying to psychiatric evaluation of criminals, and this was proved to be a very successful story. He has written the book that I told you about, the 22 cells, and at the same time Gilbert, the psychologist, was having a fuss with him because they thought they had an agreement that they're going to write the book together. So Gilbert went on writing the book about the psychological evaluation of all these 22 men. And actually, I read this book before, and one day we're going to discuss it. But the book of Kelly was not a great success. He tried to promote it and he tried to make it more accessible for the people, but usually the people have got rid. They were fed up from this fiasco that went on after the World War II, and they were really being completely immunized after following in the newspapers all the minutest details about the trial of the century. So this was him trying to find himself a way, and he was very much involved in doing a lot of things. And he was gaining money, and he was having the status of a professor of criminology, and he was admired by a lot of people and was always the center of attention. And he had a son, a daughter, and a son. The older son he named Douglas, and he has made the same things that his mother used to do on him, on Douglas number 3. So this Douglas boy went on trying to push him to the limits, to make him understand, to become a great intelligent young boy. And of course this has put a lot of pressure on the boy, because he was in his when Douglas died later on, when Dr. Kelly died later on in 1958, he was only 10 years old, and his sister and brother were much younger. So the Jack Elhay, the author of the book, has met Douglas child, Douglas Kelly child. His name was Douglas, and he met him and he told him how his father was very ill-tempered, always a perfectionist, always trying to make a fuss of everything, and therefore he was, with his ill temper and doing a lot of things, he refused to get any psychological or psychiatric help, because he thought that this could be a scandal, that the psychiatrist need a psychiatrist. So he burned well in his depression and bouts of depression, that one day he was making a fuss with his wife, and he decided suddenly to commit suicide, and he used cyanide. So he used the same bitter method of killing himself by the same way that was used by Goring, and it seems that this psychopath has affected even his psychiatrist in the decision of how to get rid of his life. But this was in 1958, that is good 13 years or 12 years after the end of the Nuremberg trials. So before we leave, I would like to tell you something about the psychiatric evaluation, or the psychological evaluation. Gilbert, who was a psychologist, and he had his PhD as well from a very distinguished university, he from Columbia as well. So he had this. He was an experienced psychologist, and he said that these criminals were criminals by nature, and they were not forced to become criminals because they followed Hitler. They had their ambitions, and they were real psychopaths. So they didn't mind to be supportive of Hitler in all his deeds and in all what he needs. And therefore they were really should be incriminated and should face this bitter end. The opinion of Dr. Kelly was that these people were forced to be bad because they were put in a bad environment. And this was the idea of the study of Milgram that was done in 1961, and the Stanford prison experiment that was done by Zimbardo later on in the late 60s, when they decided to put some students to become guardians and students to become prisoners, and how the guardians or the acting guards started to become very furious and abusive. Well, this could be true, but for this bunch of psychopath criminals, Gilbert theory stands to satisfy the thoughts of a lot of psychologists, saying that they were originally criminals. They didn't need Hitler to be there, because if they were there, Hitler would just acted as a catalyst to them. Hitler was a psychopath. He was mad, and he was the one who has done all this racism. But they were also masterminds in doing this. They were, as they say, more royal than the king himself. So they were really aggressive bunch of people. So Milgram and Zimbardo were right that people could be affected to become more or less doing bad deeds when they are ordered or put on their track on doing this. But sometimes this is not quite enough, because they will wake up in the end of the day. But the bunch who were dealt with in the court, as Gilbert says, definitely they were real psychopaths and real criminals like Goring. So it's a really interesting book. And the movie is very interesting. The movie, we can see how Rami Malek did a great role as a psychiatrist. Russell Crowe has done one of his magical roles as well as Goring. And I think we'll listen more about this film in the Oscar this year. Most probably, definitely, one of them will have an Oscar. I don't know who, but definitely this is a book to cherish. And so by this we come to the end of the program of the World of Info, and today was the World of Books. The book today was The Nazi and the Psychiatrist by Jack L. Hay, and it was analyzing, trying to analyze this interesting book that has been changed lately to a movie by the name of Nuremberg. We have seen masterminds of psychologists or psychiatrists encounter with a war criminal, that is Hermann Göring. At the same time, we have seen Rami Malek in the movie and Russell Crowe doing two master scenes, a lot of master scenes in such a great acting. So with this, we come to the end of our program today. Stay tuned always to Radio Cairo. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad is at the control, and I promise you we'll come back at the same time, same station next week, and have